Hello everyone, in this video we will be discussing the topic of food flavors, where we will discuss about the definition of the term food flavors along with the composition and the different types of food flavor, and in the end we will discuss all the different flavoring compounds which are used in food industry. So to start the topic of food flavors, and before understanding the definition of the term food flavors, I would like you guys to imagine a certain scenario where in front of you, you have been given a red strawberry cake, as you can see in this diagram over here. So just imagine you have been given a red strawberry cake. So the moment we give you a cake, your different sensory organs start to produce certain stimulations. So to begin with, the moment I have given you a strawberry cake in front of your eyes, the first sense which start to produce certain sensation is your eyes. Your eyes see the bright red colors or the different colors over the cake. So this is the first sensation which is being perceived by your body. Secondly, when you take that cake in your hand, you can feel the texture of the different components or the different ingredients which have been used. So that second component or the second sensory organ is the taste. Thirdly, when you take that piece of cake in your mouth, your tongue, your taste organs start to stimulate certain other senses. So that is your third sensory organ which generates certain stimulations or certain perception. Now, the moment you have taken it in your mouth and you are starting doing your biting and chewing, then again you can hear some certain sound of the crunch of the cake. So that is the next sensory perception your brain is telling you. And at last, when you finally swallow it, the final composition of all the integrated senses is what we call flavor. And also there is one another sense, that is your nose, or the moment you smell the different flavors of the cake. So that is your orthonasal sensory organ which start to give you certain aroma. So that is also a part of flavor. So altogether we can say that in food chemistry, the stimulation of taste or aroma receptors or other specialized nerves to produce an integrated psychological response is known as flavor. So overall we can say the integrated perception of all the contributing senses, that is your smell, your taste, your sight, your feeling, or the touch that you are getting, and at last the sound. So all the integration of all these perception of these senses is what we call flavor, and these all things are happening at the time of food consumption. So altogether, the proper definition of food flavor is that flavor, it is a sensation which is produced by a material taken in mouth, perceived principally by senses of taste and smell. So here we must focus that the major primary senses which are responsible for the perception of flavor are two senses, which is taste and smell. These are the primary senses which are responsible for the perception. The other are also there, but the primary responses or the senses are taste and smell. And the definition is also saying that also produced by journal, pain, tactile and temperature. These are the other receptors which are also responsible for the perception of flavor in the mouth. So this is the definition of the term food flavor. Now talking about the composition of flavor, as we discussed just now, that in the perception of flavor, two different components are very important, which is taste and smell. So in general, the composition of flavor composed of two different senses, which is taste and smell. So talking about both these, so taste, it is a non-volatile type of compound, as we can see, and as we know that taste we cannot see as such, it is a non-volatile compound. On the other hand, smell, it is volatile in nature. Then taste, it is perceived by the taste sensors which are present at our tongue in form of taste buds. Similarly, odor or the smell, it is being perceived by the odor receptors which are present in our sensory organ, which is our nose. So talking about taste is of different types, and we generally know there are 5 different types of taste, which include sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. So when we are talking about sweet taste, the sweet taste is generally perceived at the tip of the tongue. The taste buds which are present at the tip of the tongue are responsible for the perception of sweet taste. Similarly, salty taste, the taste buds are present on the edges of your tongue, or the corners of your tongue. Then talking about the sour taste, it is the taste buds are present at the extreme ends of your or the corners of your tongue, as you can see in this diagram over here. Then bitter taste, the taste buds are present at the back of your tongue, and umami, it is the general flavor. We will discuss about this flavor also in the end, but the taste bud for this flavor is present as such all around the tongue. Now talking about the types of odor or the smell, we generally distinguish, or we differentiate the type of odor based on their intensity. That means how intense the smell is. For example, the intensity range from 0, that means no odor, to very high or intolerable odor. So for example, when we are saying a product have no odor, we generally means the characteristics of such odor mean it has a flowery or a spicy odor, and the intensity we generally consider as 0. But as we increase the intensity, for example, if we are saying the intensity is 1 or very weak, for that case we say that the character of that odor is putrid or burnt. Now when we say that the odor is very strong or very intolerable, that means the character of that odor is very fishy or very rotten egg-like. So we know that rotten egg-like or fishy odor is generally not tolerated by human nose. So we consider that as intolerable type of odor. Now talking about the first taste, that is sweet taste in detail, we all know that sweet taste is generally being evoked by sugars. Sugars are responsible for the perception of sweet taste, and these general sugars are include fructose, which is the primary source of energy among most of the animals, then followed by glucose. Fructose is also there, which is smaller than glucose, and sucrose, which is the most common table sugar and which is a combination of glucose and fructose. It is also responsible for the perception of sweet taste. Now talking about the receptors of the sweet taste, as we all know that we discussed that the receptors or the taste buds of sweet taste are present at the tip of the tongue. So generally what happens is that there is only a single receptor which is responsible for the perception of all sweet taste. However, different sweeteners, they stimulate the different parts of that single receptor, and even the artificial sweeteners which are available in the market, they also stimulate this receptor. So what happens is that when a receptor is being stimulated, the sensory perception is received. So talking about in detail about how the sweet taste is being perceived by the sensory receptor. So as we can see in this diagram over here, this is the receptor which is present at the tip of our tongue or the taste bud. So this is the single receptor which is called as T1R2, T1R3. It is a heterodimer sweet receptor. Heterodimer because it is made up of 2 dimers. And it is making one single unit, and both these units are responsible for the perception of sweet taste. So as we can see over here, that the purple one, which is the T1R2 sweet receptor, and the yellow one or the green one, it is the T1R3 sweet receptor. So as we discussed that different molecules, the different sweet molecules attach at different parts of these receptors, which are responsible for the perception of different type of sweet taste based on their intensity. So here we can see at T1R2 a small molecule of sugar is attached, while on the other hand at T1R3 a bigger or a larger non-protein sweet molecule has been attached. Similarly, on the other hand, we can see that there is a big sweet protein or a sweet molecule has been attached in both of the in a space in combined of both these receptors. So in this way, based on the type of the sweetener, different type and their location on the receptor, the different type of sweet taste is being perceived. So that's how the sweet taste is being perceived by the human tongue. Now coming to the next taste, which is salty taste. So as we all know that salty taste, it is a classic clean taste which is generally being perceived by sodium chloride, which is salt, or also lithium chloride. However, lithium chloride is not a very commonly used salt in food industry, because lithium, it is very toxic in nature and it is cannot be perceived by human, as it can cause different toxic traits in human body, and it is dangerous for human body. So talking about salt, we all know that salt, it is made up of two molecules, which is cation and anion, and both cation and anion are responsible for perceiving or for exhibiting different type of properties. So cation, it is the molecule which is responsible for causing the basic salty taste. So when we say the major taste of salt, it is being perceived by the salty by the cation, while on the other hand anion, it basically do not play a role in the perception of salty taste, but it is generally responsible for modifying the basic salt taste of the salt molecule. Also sometimes anion, it nullifies or it decreases the intensity of the salt or the salty nature of the overall salt. So that is the function which is being exhibited by anion, while the major molecule which is responsible for exhibition of salt taste, it is cation. So talking about cation, as we discussed, that sodium and lithium are the cations which produce only the salty taste, while there are certain other cation also such as potassium and other alkaline earth cations which produce a combination of both salty and bitter taste. Based on the type of the cation, the salty taste, the intensity of salty taste is being generated. Now talking about the anion, for example chlorine or chloride, which is the anion which is least inhibitory to salt taste. So as we discussed, that anion, it is basically have the property that is modifies the basic taste, or it decreases or it alters the intensity of salt taste. So in comparison to all other anions, chloride, it is the least inhibitory anion which alters the taste of the salt, and it does not contribute to the taste of the overall salt. So it is basically the most suitable anion for salty taste, while there are certain other anions also, for example citrate anion, which is more inhibitory than the orthophosphate anions, and it contributes to less taste. So this is also one type of anion which is also present in the food industry. Now talking about the receptor of salt, the salt receptor. So the salt receptor is basically the epithelial type Na sodium channel, which is also called as ENaC, the epithelial type sodium channel which is present on the apical membrane of the taste cells. And as we discussed, the position of the taste buds which are responsible for perceiving the salt taste, which are present at the edges of the taste bud or the tongue. So what happens in the salt receptor, the basic phenomena is same only, that at the receptor the salt molecule get attached and the receptor receives the type of salt, and it produces the perceptions to the human brain. So what happens is that the larger the concentration of sodium chloride which is being applied on the tongue, just imagine if you have eaten a bulk of salt in your mouth, then what happens is that there is a larger depolarization in the relevant taste cell, and when these depolarization occur, these sodium channels, these are regulated by hormones which are involved in the water as well as in the electrolyte balance, which mediate the sodium specific appetite and intake. And apart from sodium, these receptors are also responsible for the diffusion of protons, which is H plus ions. So what happens is that this receptor, it is generally slightly slower, it perceives slower for hydrogen ions in comparison to sodium ions. That's why we say when the product is too salty, we sometimes add lemon juice, because lemon, it is basically responsible for adding hydrogen ions in the product, and in this way the overall salty nature of the food, it reduces, because the same receptor is like perceiving sodium ions also and hydrogen ion also, but since the diffusion for hydrogen ion is slow, the overall intensity of the salt taste get reduces. So that's how the reception or the perception of the salty or the sodium ions in the tongue is being perceived. Now talking about the sour taste, as we discussed that the hydrogen ion receptor is similar to that of the sodium ion. However, the overall diffusion is a little slow, but the receptor is same only. So the type of receptor is same only, that is the previous epithelial type, any sodium channel, but in case of sour taste it is hydrogen ion channel. So the sour taste, it is basically produced by the substances which are acidic in nature. As we all know that the protons, which is the H valence ions, are primarily responsible for the sour taste, and they also interact with the distinct channel which are present on the apical membrane of the subset of the taste cell, as we just now discussed. And these cations, they activate the proton gated cations and the chloride channels, as we discussed that in case of rather in case of sodium channels, when we eat sour or an acidic product, the hydrogen ion or the protons channel get activated. However, the diffusion is slightly slower in comparison to that of the sodium ions. Now talking about the bitter taste, we all know that bitterness is being caused by different bitter substances which are present in the food industry. However, the bitterness, it also resembles sweetness, and because both are triggered by the similar features in molecules which cause the some molecules to yield both bitter and sweet sensations. Now we all know that sweet molecules contain two polar groups and a non-polar group, while bitter molecules have a requirement for only one polar group and a one hydrophobic group. So because of the similarity in the basic composition of both these molecules, that is sweet molecule and bitter molecule, sometimes in some individuals they perceive a product either sweet or bitter, while some other might perceive a product as only sweet or only bitter. Now talking about the bitter substances, the lower taste threshold than other taste substances, like in comparison to the other taste, the bitter substances, they have a lower taste threshold, and they are also less soluble in water than other taste active materials. And the quinine, it is generally the most accepted standard for the bitter taste sensation in the food industry, with a detection threshold of about 10 ppm. Followed by quinine, we have caffeine, which is also a moderately bitter substance with a threshold of 150 to 200 ppm in water. And otherwise it is also present in the basic source of caffeine is coffee, tea and cola nuts. Then theobromine, it is also a bitter substance which is very similar to caffeine, and it is present in cocoa. Then there is another plant-based bitter substance which is naringin, which is being produced from grapefruit peels, and the enzyme which is used for the extraction of this bitter substance is called as naringinase. And instead of for those people who do not who rather prefer a slightly lesser bitter taste, naringin is being used in place of caffeine to alter the bitterness in some food applications. So these are the major bitter substances which are being used in the food company or the food industry, with quinine being the standard for the bitter substances. Now talking about the fifth taste, which is the umami taste. So umami taste is, it basically contributes as a delicious mouth-watering taste to food when used in excess of their independent detection threshold, and they are also responsible for modifying and enhancing the flavor at lower levels of their independent detection threshold. And umami taste, it is also responsible for their effect, they have their effects prominent and desirable in the flavor of vegetables, meat, poultry, fish, shellfish and the aged cheeses. And apart from it, the taste of amino acid, we all know that the taste of amino acid fall into both sweet and bitter categories, where the sweet is the sweet molecule is because of the D amino acid, while the bitter taste is because of the L isomers type of amino acid, which are responsible for giving both sweet as well as the bitter taste to a product. But there are an exception to this amino acid, which is L-glutamate and its sodium salt, which is nothing but monosodium glutamate. So the effect which is being generated by this L-glutamate on taste cell, it involves both inotropic receptors that activate the ion channels and an unusual taste specific metabrotropic glutamer receptors, which are present in our tongue, are responsible for perception of this taste, and this taste is actually what we say is umami. So in our taste receptor there is this metabrotropic glutamate receptor which is present in our tongue, which is responsible for the perception of the monosodium glutamate or the umami taste, which is being perceived by the exceptional amino acid, which is L-glutamate, and its sodium salt, which is nothing but monosodium glutamate, and the overall perception lead to the taste, which is umami taste. So the synergistic interaction between both the umami taste is responsible for enhancing the overall flavor of whatever product we are eating. Now, talking about the different type of flavoring compounds, the first flavoring compound that we will be discussing is aldehydes. So aldehyde, the CHO is the formula which represent aldehydes, and these are the carbonyl functional groups, and these are the component of many fruit flavoring. So whenever we are talking about aldehyde, the thing we must, or the product we must remember is the fruits and their flavoring. They have aldehydes in them as the major flavoring compounds. So basically C3 to C5 aldehydes, for example propanol, butanol and pentanol, propanol, butanol and pentanol, they tend to have a chemical or a malty flavor to them. Then talking about the branched aldehydes, for example the branch C5 aldehydes, for example 2 and 3 methyl butanol, they are found mostly in cooked foods as well as in fresh fruits and vegetables, which are responsible for giving a chemical note to them. Then if we have a kind of branching to them, for example cis-3 hexanol, it is particularly responsible for giving the fresh taste to tomatoes, pomegranate, oranges, apples, as well as to the freshly pickled coriander. So here we must again notice that all the fresh fruits and vegetables have the typical aldehyde taste, which give them a fresh and a fruity flavor to them. Then acetaldehyde, which is the end product of fermentation, it is responsible for giving a pungent odor, but at dilute concentration it also has a pleasant aroma flavor. So even in fermented foods, the acetaldehyde, it is responsible for giving the typical pungent as well as the pleasant fruity aroma to the product. Then there are also aldehydes which contain aromatic rings such as benzaldehyde, which is present in bitter elements. Similarly, phenylacetaldehyde, which is present in rose and honey, and cinnamonaldehyde, which is present in cinnamon. Then there is again an aldehyde, which is vanillin, which gives a typical vanilla flavor, which is nothing but 4-hydroxy 3-methoxybenzaldehyde. So again, vanillin, it is actually an aldehyde compound which gives the typical vanilla flavor in different food products. Now coming to the next flavoring agent or flavoring compound, which is ketone, which is C-double-bond-O carbonyl functional group. So the straight chain of methyl ketones, for example the 2-heptanone, which is found in cheese, white bread, butter and beer, then they impart a fruity pear aroma, as well as there are certain other ketones such as 3-octanone, which produce an earthy mushroom notes. So here we must remember that whenever we are talking about ketones, the thing that should or must come to our mind is butter and all the fatty flavors which we have. So ketone is basically responsible for giving the flavor in butter and milk products. So as we discussed, that heptanone, which is found in cheese and in butter, bread, beer, so these flavor, the typical flavor in these products is basically because of the ketones. Then there are certain other ketones such as 2,3-butane dione, or which is also called as diacetyl, and 2,3-pentane dione, which provides a buttery, creamy note in many cooked foods. So again, whenever we are talking about buttery and creamy flavor, it means ketone. Diacetyl, the typical flavor of butter, because of ketone, which is 2,3-butane dione. Then again, acetone, which is a common flavor substance in many cultured dairy product, is again a ketone, which gives the typical flavor to the dairy products. Then it basically have a creamy, slightly sweet but butter-like flavor that is similar to that of diacetyl. Then acetone and 2-butanone, these both are contributed in milk, and they have a certain volatile flavor to them, with which are responsible for giving the typical flavor to the milk products. So again, ketones means the typical buttery and creamy flavor in dairy products or in any kind of cooked product is basically because of ketones and ketone type flavoring compounds. Now coming to the next flavoring compound, which is esters. So esters, as we all know, are the result of the reaction between carboxylic acid and alcohol. As we can see, because of the reaction of an acid and alcohol, the final product is ester. So esters, whenever we are thinking of esters, we must try to remember that esters is being related to the fruity smell in any product. So whenever we smell a fruity odor, it means there are certain kind of esters in it. So that's how we must remember esters. So the aroma of most fruits, for example melons, apples, pineapples and strawberries, because of esters. The ethyl esters are the major compounds which are found in fruit aroma, particularly in the ripe fruits when the production of ethanol is being boosted. Then we have ethyl butanoate and ethyl butyrites, which are responsible, which resembles the strawberry aroma. Then we have ethyl hexanate, which is a characteristic flavor, which give the characteristic flavor of fresh pineapple and more tropical fruits. Then we have 3-methyl-butyl acetate, which is a characteristics of pear and pear drops. Then again we have allyl hexanate, which is a typical pineapple flavor or the smell. Then we have esters also contribute to the more delicate aromas which are found in cultured ham and certain cheese. So apart from fruits, there are certain meat products and certain cheeses also which have a slight hint of esters to them, these are different type of esters. Now coming to the next flavoring compounds, we have terpenes and terpenoids. So terpenes, terpenoids and other sesquiterpenes, these are the major compounds which are present in essential oil. So again, when we are talking and thinking about terpenes and terpenoids, we must remember these by essential oils. So these flavoring compounds are responsible for the aroma of many fruits, particularly citrus fruits as well as herbs and spices. These are biosynthesized from the units of isoprene, that is C5H8, and the most common example of these flavoring compounds include limonene, which we all know has a weak orangey citrus peel aroma, and terpenoids alcohols are also present in the food industry, for example nerol, geraniol, citronel and linalool. So these are the flavoring compounds which provide a delicate lemon, rose and volatile aromas to herbs, spices and fruits, and these terpenoid alcohols are used for the extraction of these particular flavors in the flavor as well as in the food industry. Now talking about methanol, which provide the minty note and also activates the cold sensitive receptors in the oral cavity to produce cooling effect, is also and a product which has been extracted using the basic terpene and terpenoids compounds in a product. Then we also have L-carbonon, which contributes to the smell of spearmint, which is similar to that of menthol, which is again a type of terpene and terpenoids type of flavoring compounds. Now coming to the next flavoring compounds, we have alcohols and phenols. So these basically contributes to the aroma, which is less, like the aroma of these compounds, it is basically less than that of aldehydes, and the straight chain of alcohols. These are the most abundant which are found in fruits, and they often increases with maturity. So as the fruit matures, the alcohol and the phenols components in that product increases, and the typical aroma of alcohol and phenols is being seen in a mature or a ripe product in comparison to an unripe or like the basic product. Now, talking about certain examples, we have 2-methyl 1-propanol, which is associated with the browning apples or the brown apples, which we basically see in a bruised fruit. So as we said, as we discussed, that when a product matures and it even reaches a state when it has been bruised or it has turned brown, so that typical aroma or flavor in that product is basically because of alcohols or propanol. For example, the 2-methyl 1-propanol, which is present in the brown apples, the bruised fruit, is basically because of alcohols and phenols. Then we have 1-octane 3-ol, which is the characteristics of mushroom. So the flavor of mushroom is basically because of the alcohols and the phenolic flavoring compounds present in them. We also have geosamin, which give a characteristic earthy and musty notes to beetroot. And then we also have phenols like terpene derived thymol and eugenol, which provide the flavor to thyme and clove. So these herbs and spices are also responsible for the extraction of the typical phenolic flavoring compounds, which is thymol, which is present in thyme plant, and eugenol, which is present in the clove plant. Now the next type of flavoring compound is amine. So whenever we are thinking of amines or talking about amines, the thing that must come to our mind is fish and the typical aroma of fish. So amines are nothing but the nitrogen containing compounds and the typical fishy odor, and often the unpleasant ammoniacal note is basically of the presence of amines in that product. And when we talk about trimethylamine, which is present in fish, and phenylethylamine, which is present in chocolates, nuts, citrus fruits, and vinegar, these all are the examples of amines which are responsible for giving the typical flavor of that product in these products. Then talking about lactones, again, when we are talking about lactones, the thing that must come to our mind are peaches and coconuts, because the typical flavor of these fruits and these products is basically because of the presence of lactones in them. So what are lactones? Lactones are basically cyclic esters that are potent aroma compounds formed from corresponding hydroxy acid. So they tend to impart peachy, creamy, and coconut aroma. So the gamma decalactone, it is a major lactone which is present in both peaches and nectarines. So whenever we are talking about peaches and nectarines, it means the lactanone compound, the lactanone flavoring compound, which is gamma decalactone, it is responsible for giving the typical flavor of that product. Then again we have jasmine lactone, which is responsible for providing the petal-like aroma in green tea. Now coming to the next flavoring compound, sulfur compounds. So sulfur compounds, for example, sulfide, such as dimethyl sulfide. It is the most important fruit flavor, as well as it is present in sweet corn and aspirants aroma. So what happens, and there are certain other sulfur compounds also. For example, there are allyl methyl sulfide and 1-propanol sulfide, which are present in garlic and onion. So what happens is, we can see from this diagram over here that in the typical garlic bulb we have gamma glutamyl L-cysteine amino acid, and when we crush or we cut or chop that garlic, so what happens is that the cells rupture and the alanine get converted into allicin in presence of the enzyme allinase, and this allicin is when further decomposed or the decomposition of this compound happens in presence of certain heat or solvents, then there are certain oil soluble compounds which are being generated, which include DAS, DADS and DADTS, which is diallyl sulfide, diallyl disulfide and diallyl trisulfide. So these compounds are basically the sulfur compounds which are responsible for giving the typical aroma of the typical aroma of onion and garlic when they are being cooked. So we know that when we crush a garlic or an onion, the alanine get converted into allicin. However, when we cook, or the decomposition of that crushed or cooked, the crushed or chopped garlic or onion has been occurred, the typical flavor is because of these three compounds, which are nothing but the sulfur compounds. Then we also have thiols, which are responsible for imparting a characteristic meaty aroma. For example, these meaty aroma are being generated by 2-methyl-3-furan-thiol and bis 2-methyl-3-furan disulfide. Then we also have thiocyanate, which are responsible for giving the typical flavor in cooked cauliflower. And this typical flavor is being given by allyl isothiocyanate, which is the key odorant contributing the pungent smell, and it also give a typical smell of black mustard-like note in the cauliflower. Then we also have methyl thiocyanate, butyl isothiocyanate, and 2-methyl isothiocyanate, and certain sulfides which give the typical aroma and flavor in the sulfides in the broccoli. Then this is the basically summarized table of the different flavoring compounds. You can take a screenshot for remembering all the different type of flavoring compounds in the different food products and their food sources, and this is the continued table. So this was all about flavors and different flavoring compounds in food industry along with their types and composition. If you have any doubt regarding this topic, please comment down below, and do not forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you.